Welcome back to the Brahmin Word, and we are taking another look at the life of Peter today. And today we are going to be looking at the miraculous events of the transfiguration of Jesus, because Peter was actually present for that event. So we are going to be walking through the transfiguration of Jesus today. But as we do so, we are going to be asking one big question when it comes to Moses and Elijah. Why is it that those two are the ones that show up with Jesus, and it's not like Abraham and Noah or David and Solomon? I think there is a interesting possible solution to that question. And so we are going to be taking a look at that today. We're also going to just walk through the fact that Jesus is 100% man, but also 100% God as well. And then we'll even take a hint or a look at the Trinity too. So we are going to be in Matthew chapter 17 for most of the day. Today we are going to be in verses 1 through 9, but we're also, or you can also take a look at Mark chapter 9 and Luke chapter 9, because that is where the transfiguration can be found in those two gospels as well. But let's start and spend most of our time in Matthew chapter 17, starting in verse 1. And after 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John, his brother, and led them up a high mountain by themselves. All right, so right off the bat, you have a time frame, and that time frame really goes back to the chapter before, with the with the proclamation of Jesus, the proclamation slash confession of Peter about who Jesus is. But then, of course, also the just kind of bad decision making of Peter to rebuke Jesus, that we talked about last time as well. So it's about 6 days after that. Now, what's interesting with this is in Mark chapter 9, verse 2, you also see this. And after 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John. But in Luke chapter 9, verse 28, though, you have a slight difference. Now, about 8 days after these sayings, he took with him Peter and John and James and went up on the mountain to pray. So first off, you see a little bit more details what they were doing on that mountain. They were going up there to pray. But you do get a different timetable here. So in Luke chapter 9, verse 28 mentions 8 days, whereas in Mark chapter 9, verse 2, and Matthew chapter 17, verse 1, it mentions 6 days. So obviously, 6 and 8 are different words. They're different numbers, they're different words. So does that mean that there is a contradiction here? Well, first thing first, whether it is 6 days or 8 days, the message of the section and the validity of the section don't change at all. So you have to make that crystal clear. However, when it comes to actual words, yes, there is a difference between 6 and 8. However, though, there is a solution to this. And actually, there's kind of two parts to this. First, in ancient Near Eastern culture, sometimes it would be very, very common that some would count some days, whereas others wouldn't count that days. And this is what I mean by this. It's very possible that Luke actually counted the day of Peter making the confession or the proclamation that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God, as one day. And then you would have 6 days intervening between that proclamation day and the day of transfiguration, which then Luke would actually count as a separate day. And therefore, 1 plus 6 plus 1, that's how you would get to 8 days. So that's one solution that you could bring up if somebody asks you about the difference between 6 days and 8 days with these passages. The other thing that you could bring up as well is actually just one word. In Luke chapter 9, verse 28, there is the word about. In the Greek, it is hosea. And really, what's interesting about this word is not necessarily its meaning, because, well, it just means about, but it means the use of this word is interesting because whether it's 6 days, 7 days, 8 days, even 9 days, it all of those could be called now about 8 days after. So, is there a contradiction between Luke chapter 9 and Matthew 17 and Mark chapter 9? There is not. And so I just want to kind of clarify why there's a distinction there and how you might go about answering somebody that brings that up. But let's go back to the transfiguration, though. So Matthew chapter 17, verse 2. And he, Jesus, was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became white as light. All right, this is really, really cool. So the word transfiguration is genuinely, it's a great question to ask. What does transfiguration mean? Well, it actually just means a profound, radiant change in appearance or spiritual form. So, what I think is going on here is that Jesus is showing his divinity in its full glory. He is showing them that he is the Son of God. So, yes, Peter made that proclamation the chapter before, or about a week before. But now he is really showing that, hey, I am the Son of God. And I think that's such a powerful statement, too. But he is really showing his glory. I love this description. His face shone like the sun. It really goes back to the book of Exodus, when you have Moses meeting with God the Father, and he is being given the tablets of stone, and he comes down from the mountain, and his face shines because he has spent time with God. And I think that's kind of what you're supposed to go back to when it comes to verse 2 and the description of his face shone like the sun. But obviously, his face shines way more brighter than Moses's did because, of course, Jesus is the Son of God. Verse 3. And behold, there appeared to them Moses and Elijah talking with him. And Peter said to Jesus, Lord, it is good that we are here. If you wish, I will make 3 tents here, one for you and one for Moses and one for Elijah. All right, pause here. It is a great question. Why is it that Moses and Elijah are here instead of Abraham, Noah, David, Solomon, these great figures in the Old Testament? And don't get me wrong, Moses and Elijah are also great figures. But why is it that those two show up and not any of the others? Well, for me, I think it is absolutely to show why Jesus is here. And it is to show that he is going to be fulfilling the law and the prophets. And I think that is, it is so cool to see this because it makes you look at the Transfiguration event in such a different light. Because what is really going on here is that Moses, who is really connected with the law, of course, it's showing that, hey, I am here to fulfill the law. I am here to be the only sacrificial lamb that you need. And then and then Elijah is there to show that Jesus is fulfilling the prophets. He is there to show that, hey, I am the one that you have talked about, that you have been waiting for. I am the Messiah, the anointed one that was going to be coming at some point. And I think that is such a beautiful thing to see. And that's why I think Moses and Elijah are the ones that were there and why they were there. But then, of course, Peter speaks. And so, yes, James, John, they don't speak, but Peter does. Now, Peter, James, and John are there because they are kind of like an inner circle or a leader group within the disciples themselves. We also see this a little bit in the Garden of Gethsemane also. But Peter speaks up, and what he says is not, it's not like it's awful, because it starts with a very true statement. It is good that we are here. Yeah, I bet it is. Like, you get to see Moses and Elijah, and not only that, but you get to see Jesus in his full glory. Like, oh my goodness. Yeah, it's good that you're there. But then he follows it up with talking about tents. Now, some most likely kids have like, oh, so Peter just wants to camp out with Jesus, Moses, and Elijah. Of course, that's super cute and very funny. But actually, what this is getting at is kind of like the tabernacle, all the way back in the Pentateuch, or the books of the law with well, Pentateuch is first 5 books, but you have in the books of the law, though, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, you have the talk about the tabernacle, which comes before the building of the temple. And so the tabernacle is where you would meet with God. That is where God dwelt on top of the Ark of the Covenant. So for me, it is incredibly interesting that that shows up here, because I think it's really supposed to make you go back to that time. Now, God responds to what Peter is saying, and he does so really right away. Verse 5. Peter, was still speaking when, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." There's so many connections here when it comes to the Old Testament, but there's also a connection with just something earlier in Jesus' ministry, and that's the words of God the Father here. "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased." So you're supposed to go all the way back to Jesus' baptism, which, of course, John would have been there at the baptism because he was one of the disciples of John the Baptist. I think that's really, really cool to see. But I think he mentions this because of what Peter says about the tents. But before we go into that, I do want to mention too the bright cloud. We see God and his glory, God the Father and his glory, with being connected with the cloud. You have the pillar of cloud in the book of Exodus, for instance, but you also have that being mentioned in just the books of the law as well. So I think that's really, really interesting. That is mentioning a cloud here at this point. But why is it that God the Father is asking for these 3 disciples to listen to Jesus? Is because or one of the thoughts is because Peter is actually trying to level Jesus, Moses, and Elijah as the same, because he wants to build 3 tents for them. Whereas God the Father is trying to say that Jesus is my one and only Son, with whom I am well pleased, and so therefore listen to him. I think that is so cool to think about. But it's also why the disciples respond the way that they do in verse 6. When the disciples heard this, they fell on their faces and were terrified. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, "Rise and have no fear." And when they lifted up their eyes, they saw no one but Jesus only. Here, I think, is where you see that Jesus is 100% God, but also 100% man. It's not that he is 50-50 or that he turns off like his divinity and his humanity like a valve. He is 100% God and he is 100% man. And I think this passage really shows that. And then, of course, with the voice of God the Father in verse 5, you also see the Trinity aspect as well. Even though the Spirit is not mentioned here specifically, we just go back to the fact that God is three persons in one essence. He is God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. And I think that is really, really cool to see in this passage. But then we'll end it with verse 9 here, which is kind of funny. Verse 9, and as they were coming down the mountain, Jesus commanded them, Peter, James, and John, tell no one the vision until the Son of Man is raised from the dead. What? It's literally just like, wait, we just saw this incredible thing and you want us to not mention it at all? Okay. Like, that would have been such a crazy moment for these three guys. They must have looked at each other like, are you serious? What did we just see? So that must have been a great, great moment. But here, with the transfiguration of Jesus, what a great and just magnificent moment where you see that Jesus is 100% man and 100% God as well. Yeah, what a great opportunity that must have been, and a privilege that must have been for Peter, James, and John to have seen that. But with that being said, thanks for spending a little bit of time with me today as we continue to walk through the life of Peter, and we will continue to do so next week. But thanks for spending time with me today. I will see you next week. Thanks.